nobody gave her a chance. Not one analyst, not a single oddsmaker, not even the most optimistic voice in the crowd at Linz's design center would have put serious money on what was about to unfold. Alexandra Eala, a 20-year-old from Manila ranked 46th in the world, walked onto an indoor clay court she had never played on in competitive tennis and did something that sent shockwaves through the entire WTA tour. She took down Jeļena Ostapenko, a former Grand Slam champion, the fourth seed, and a player who had owned this tournament before. And she did it with a kind of composure that made you wonder whether the rest of the tour has been paying close enough attention. To understand the magnitude of what happened in Linz, you have to rewind. You have to go back to the beginning, to a girl from the Philippines who picked up a racket at 5 years old and fell so deeply in love with tennis that she convinced her family to let her chase a dream halfway across the planet. At 13, Alex Eala moved to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy. 13. Think about that for a moment. Most kids that age are figuring out their first year of high school, navigating friendships, worrying about homework. Eala left everything familiar behind and threw herself into the crucible of professional development under one of the most demanding programs in world tennis. The years that followed were quiet in the way that foundational years always are. She won junior Grand Slam doubles titles at the French Open and the Australian Open. She climbed through ITF events, picking up singles titles on the lower tier of the professional circuit. The WTA rankings barely acknowledged her existence. By early 2025, she sat around number 140 in the world, a name that meant almost nothing to the casual tennis fan. And then Miami happened. The 2025 Miami Open was supposed to be a footnote. Eala entered on a wild card, a courtesy extended to a young player with potential, but without the resume to command respect. Her first round was routine enough to be forgettable. But in the second round, she drew Jeļena Ostapenko, who was seeded 20th and carried the pedigree of a player who had won Roland Garros in 2017. That match was the first time these two women shared a court, and what happened next changed the trajectory of Eala's career forever. Ostapenko came out swinging the way she always does. If you have ever watched Ostapenko play tennis, you know the deal. She is arguably the most aggressive ball striker on the women's tour, a player who hits every ground stroke as if the ball personally offended her. Her forehand generates absurd power, and her willingness to go for winners from impossible positions means she can blow anyone off the court on a given day. She is also capable of gifting you an avalanche of unforced errors when the timing is slightly off. That is the Ostapenko gamble. Breathtaking brilliance or maddening inconsistency, sometimes within the same game. In Miami, Ostapenko took an early stranglehold. She raced to a 4-0 lead in the first set, and it looked like the young Filipina was about to be swallowed whole. But Eala did something that day that revealed the core of her competitive character. She did not panic. She adjusted. She found a way to slow the rallies down, to draw Ostapenko into longer exchanges where the Latvian's aggression started to betray her. Point by point, Eala clawed back. She won the first set in a tiebreak, 7-6, conceding only 2 mini-break points. Then she took the second set 7-5 in a match that lasted nearly 2 hours. The tennis world raised an eyebrow. What followed that Ostapenko victory in Miami was nothing short of extraordinary. Eala beat Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, in straight sets. She then dismantled Iga Świątek, the world number 2 and the most dominant clay court player of her generation, 6-2, 7-5, in a quarterfinal that left commentators reaching for superlatives. A wildcard ranked 140th had reached the semifinals of a WTA 1000 event. It was the biggest story in women's tennis that spring, and it turned Alex Eala from a curiosity into a phenomenon overnight. The semifinal loss to Jessica Pegula was heartbreaking, a 3-set battle where Eala served for the match in the second set before the veteran's experience edged her out. But the damage was done in the best possible way. Eala had announced herself. Her ranking rocketed upward. By mid-2025, she was inside the top 100. By early 2026, She had reached a career high of 29 in the world, making her the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player in history, male or female. The girl from Manila who had trained on the red clay of Mallorca was now a bona fide threat on the WTA Tour. Their second meeting came at the Eastbourne Open in June 2025, on grass, a surface that theoretically should have favored Ostapenko's flat, penetrating ball striking. The Latvian was seeded third. The result was chaotic and strange, as matches involving Ostapenko often are. Eala lost the first set 0-6, completely outclassed in a blur of winners that whistled past her before she could blink. Then something shifted. In the second set, Eala found a way to neutralize Ostapenko's power, pushing the ball deeper, varying her spins, and forcing the Latvian to generate her own pace rather than redirect Eala's. Eala took the second set 6-2. She was leading 3-2 in the third when Ostapenko retired due to a left ankle injury. It was an unsatisfying conclusion, and both players knew it. The head-to-head read 2-0 in Eala's favor, but there was an asterisk next to that second win that Ostapenko surely wanted to erase. Which brings us to Linz. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open in April 2026 marked a significant moment in the tournament's history. For the first time, the event was being played on clay, indoor clay specifically, a surface installed in the Design Center Linz in just 5 days. It was a WTA 500 event, a step up in prestige and points, and the draw was loaded. Ekaterina Alexandrova, the defending champion, Emma Raducanu, Karolina Pliskova, and Ostapenko seeded fourth, lurking in the same quarter of the draw as Eala. For Eala, this tournament represented uncharted territory in multiple ways. It was her clay court season debut. Despite training extensively on clay at the Nadal Academy throughout her developmental years, her professional results on the surface were thin. Her 2026 season had been defined by hard court results, a promising run to the fourth round of the Australian Open, a deep push at the Miami Open again before Karolina Muchova dispatched her 6-0, 6-2 in the round of 16. That Miami loss stung. It was the kind of reality check that reminds a young player how thin the margin is between brilliance and irrelevance at the highest level. The Linz draw presented an immediate obstacle. Eala's first-round opponent was Julia Grabher, an Austrian playing on home soil in front of an adoring crowd. Grabher, ranked 87th, had the advantage of familiarity with indoor conditions and the emotional fuel of a partisan audience. On paper, Eala was the favorite. In practice, first-round matches at unfamiliar venues on unfamiliar surfaces against motivated local players are minefields. Eala handled it with surgical precision. She won 6-4, 6-3, hitting 18 winners against 20 unforced errors and saving 9 of 10 break points, a statistic that tells you everything about her composure under pressure. When opponents had opportunities to crack her open, she slammed the door shut, over and over again. The victory set up exactly what everyone had been anticipating since the draw was released, the trilogy match against Ostapenko. The tactical puzzle of facing Ostapenko is unlike anything else on the WTA Tour. Most players build their game around consistency, around making one more ball than their opponent and waiting for errors. Ostapenko rejects that philosophy entirely. She is a first-strike player, someone who aims to end points within the first 3 or 4 shots. Her forehand generates tremendous topspin when she wants it and devastating flat pace when she is feeling bold. Her backhand, hit with a westernish grip that allows her to generate vicious angles, can paint lines or fly 3 feet long depending on her confidence level. Facing her is like standing in the path of a storm. You cannot control the weather, but you can decide how you position yourself within it. Eala's approach across their first 2 meetings revealed a sophisticated understanding of how to weather that storm. Rather than trying to out-hit Ostapenko, which is a fool's errand for nearly everyone on tour, Eala focused on depth and placement. She pushed the ball into Ostapenko's body, taking away the space the Latvian needs to load up on her swings. She varied her serve placement, keeping Ostapenko guessing and preventing the kind of explosive return games that can demoralize opponents in a hurry. And crucially, She stayed patient during Ostapenko's inevitable hot streaks, understanding that the same aggression that produces those stunning winners also produces the errors that follow them. What made the Linz encounter particularly fascinating from an analytical standpoint was the surface. Clay, even indoor clay, fundamentally alters the equation. The ball sits up higher after bouncing. Points tend to be longer. The surface rewards patience and endurance over raw power. For Ostapenko, this is a double-edged sword. She won the French Open on clay, so she clearly knows how to weaponize her power on the slower surface. But clay also gives opponents more time to react, more time to set up defensively, more time to redirect the ball and extend rallies into the kind of attritional exchanges that can drain Ostapenko's focus. For Eala, the clay should have been an advantage in theory. She spent her formative years training on it. The sliding footwork, the patience, the willingness to construct points over 10 or 12 shots rather than 3 or 4, all of that was baked into her game during those years at the Nadal Academy. But theory and practice are different things, and stepping onto clay for the first time in a competitive match in months introduces variables. Your timing is slightly different. Your feet need to remember how to slide. The rhythm of the rallies changes in subtle ways that can throw off a player who has been living on hard courts. The atmosphere inside the design center was electric. Eala had become something of a cult figure on the WTA Tour, and Filipino fans had traveled to Linz in significant numbers, creating a wall of noise that rivaled what grab her had received from the home crowd in the first round. Ostapenko, never one to shrink from a charged atmosphere, fed off the energy too. She is a player who plays better when there is tension in the air, when the crowd is invested, when the moment feels heavy. The match itself was a chess match disguised as a boxing contest. Ostapenko came out firing, as she always does, testing whether Eala's clay court legs were ready from the first point. The Latvian serve was landing with conviction, her first serve percentage hovering around 58%, and when that first delivery went in, she was winning the majority of those points. Eala, however, was making Ostapenko work on second serve. That second serve return became the fulcrum of the entire match, because when Eala could get into the rally on Ostapenko's second delivery, the dynamic tilted sharply in her favor. The first set was excruciating in its closeness. Neither player could establish sustained dominance. Ostapenko would rip a forehand winner down the line, and Eala would answer with a perfectly constructed point that ended in a drop shot Ostapenko could not reach despite her surprising foot speed. The games piled up, the tension compounding with each one. Breakpoints came and went for both players. Ostapenko had 10 break-point opportunities across the match and converted only 3 of them, a conversion rate that would have infuriated her. Eala's ability to save those break points was not luck. It was the product of a mindset forged in Miami, in Eastbourne, in every match where she had learned that the moments of greatest danger are also the moments of greatest opportunity. The way Eala managed the critical junctures of the match was the single most impressive aspect of her performance. When Ostapenko would build momentum, stringing together 2 or 3 explosive points, Eala refused to let the avalanche develop. She would throw in a well-placed first serve to halt the run. She would change the speed of her ground strokes, giving Ostapenko a loopy, heavy ball to deal with instead of the pace she craves. These are not the adjustments of a young player still learning the game. These are the instincts of a competitor who has internalized the lessons of her biggest moments and can access them under pressure. There was a passage of play in the latter stages of the match that crystallized everything. Ostapenko was serving to stay in the set, and she opened the game with an ace down the tee. Then a forehand winner that landed on the baseline. Then a double fault. Then a forehand into the net. Then another forehand into the net. That 5-point sequence encapsulated the eternal contradiction of Ostapenko's tennis, genius and self-destruction living side by side, sometimes separated by no more than a single ball toss. Eala, standing on the other side of the net, simply waited. She did not try to force the issue. She trusted that if she kept presenting the same steady, deep, tactically intelligent tennis, Ostapenko's variance would eventually work in her favor. And it did. When the final point ended, Eala had done it again. 3 meetings, 3 victories. The Filipino contingent in the stands erupted. Eala herself reacted with a controlled fist pump, the kind of celebration that suggested she had expected this outcome even if the world had not. In her on-court interview, she was characteristically measured, praising Ostapenko's quality and acknowledging the difficulty of the match without betraying any of the emotion that must have been churning beneath the surface. The significance of this victory extends far beyond a single result at a single tournament. It confirms a pattern that is becoming impossible to ignore. Eala has Ostapenko's number. In tennis, stylistic matchups matter enormously. Some players simply present the wrong puzzle for certain opponents, and Eala's combination of defensive solidity, tactical intelligence, and mental resilience is precisely the cocktail that neutralizes Ostapenko's all-or-nothing approach. When Ostapenko faces a player who can absorb her power and redirect it, her margin for error shrinks, and the unforced errors that are always lurking beneath the surface of her game rise up and consume her. But there is something deeper happening here, something that transcends matchup analysis. What we are witnessing with Eala is the emergence of a player who is redefining what is possible for tennis in Southeast Asia. The Philippines has never produced a player of this caliber. There is no infrastructure to speak of, no tradition of Grand Slam contenders, no pipeline of talent flowing from Manila to the tour. Eala has built this herself, with the support of her family and the training she received in Mallorca, but without the institutional backing that players from tennis-rich nations take for granted. Every time she steps on court against a former Grand Slam champion and wins, she chips away at the notion that elite tennis belongs exclusively to certain countries, certain systems, certain backgrounds. The Filipino fans who traveled to Austria to watch her play did not just come to see a tennis match. They came to witness someone carrying an entire nation's sporting aspirations on her shoulders, and doing it with a grace and a competitiveness that belies her 20 years on this planet. The road ahead at Linz remained treacherous. The draw was stacked with dangerous opponents, and the clay court season was only beginning. Eala's development on this surface over the coming weeks would tell us whether she could translate her hard court breakthroughs into genuine clay court credentials. But on this particular evening, in this particular arena, none of that mattered. What mattered was the scoreboard, and the scoreboard said the same thing it had said twice before: Eala over Ostapenko. For Ostapenko, the loss will sting because it represents a trend she cannot seem to reverse. She is too good a player and too fierce a competitor to accept being someone's stylistic victim, and you can be certain she will study the tape and look for solutions. But the challenge she faces is fundamental. Eala does not give her what she wants. Eala does not feed her pace. Eala does not wilt under the barrage. And until Ostapenko finds a way to impose a different kind of pressure, this head-to-head will continue to favor the younger woman. For Eala, this is another chapter in a story that seems to be writing itself in real time. From the Nadal Academy to the Miami breakthrough to this clay court statement in Austria, the arc is unmistakable. She is ascending, and the rate of that ascent is accelerating. The tennis world has taken notice. The question is no longer whether Eala belongs at this level. The question is how high she can climb, and whether the rest of the tour is ready for the answer.